Um, Hello, here's Miss Neal. We're going to be interviewing Zeynep, who is our, not a tour guide, but kind of our double OZ, who has been with us since the beginning of the trip, and she's going to answer some questions about Turkey and tell us a little bit about herself. So,
hello. Yes, my name is Zeynep Güven, full name. I work for a nonprofit called Turkish Cultural Foundation, which is the sponsor of this trip, and I'm here to help our tour guide and answer any questions our teachers might have. I've been abroad for 16 years now. I lived in Austria for 3 years, which is where I studied through high school, and then I went to the United States, to Washington D.C. in particular, which is where I've been for the past 13 years. I was born and raised in Turkey, and yeah. Do you need anything else? Oh, and
whatever I say.
Okay, and whatever I say does not reflect what my organization's position is, but these are my personal views. And I was born and raised in Ankara, Turkey's capital.
And that's in the middle of the country.
That's in central Anatolia, and that's our last stop on the trip.
Nice. Okay, so why do you think Anatolia has attracted so many people over the centuries? Like the layered nature of Anatolia culturally.
I think that the easiest answer to that question is the natural land bridge that Anatolia forms between what we now call Europe and Asia. Not that those were necessarily the reasons why people came through Anatolia, but if you look at history, you see the Roman civilization, the Greek civilization, the Ottomans, the Persians, they all really meshed over Anatolia because that was the only connection between the East and the West, and that I think really was conducive to all the layering throughout the centuries of different tribes moving through different geographies, just a natural land bridge that connected people.
And also, if you look at the Mediterranean, the Mediterranean is like a water bridge, kind of.
Exactly. So many trade routes, Silk Route, Spice Route. Everything had to go through either Anatolia, the Straits, which is why Istanbul is very strategically important, as well as the land itself.
Okay.
And when we go to Ephesus, I'm sure Orhan told you too, but like even Ephesus being a port city, that played a role in dissemination of Christianity. People got to learn from each other through trade routes, through merchants and whatnot. So it was a hub in the past, and I think it's still a hub. It's just that Turks happen to live here now.
Yeah,
and we have real borders as opposed to tribes migrating.
How do you see different traditions interacting in Turkey?
I think that personally, again, I think that there's a backward trend that probably can be pinpointed back to the rise of nationalism in the French Revolution. But if you look at the Ottoman Empire especially, I don't think that I need to go further back because I have the Crusades and a real effort to sort of homogenize the population. But with the Ottoman Empire, what you see is basically a powerful empire that really lets its subjects, because that's how people were seen in the day, but an empire that let its subjects just do their own thing. Of course, like based on religious divides, people would get taxed at different rates, but other than that, there was no mandatory religious conversion, or even language was not a mandatory thing. There's really no one identity that made up Ottoman Empire. And that actually brought about a huge, I think, level of tolerance that is really, if you think about it, in our genes. Being people of Anatolia, we've always lived with different people because of Turkey's or Anatolia's natural land bridge that we just discussed. So there have always been different tribes and different peoples and different belief systems that came through Anatolia, and that always found a level of tolerance that enabled all these peoples to live together, unless of course there were religious clashes between, let's say, Persians and Orthodox Christians. But other than that, it's been a very tolerant place. But with the rise of nationalism and the need to formulate identities.
Hold on one second. Oh, there we go. never mind.
The formulation of identities, I think there are now more contentious issues that pertain to our identity formation that didn't necessarily exist back in the day.
Interesting.
Does that answer?
No, that's a great answer. Yeah,
Okay,
thank
good.
you. Very thorough. You got to know your history. You got to know your history, kids.
It's important.
That was pretty scary. That was a
That's
big,
important.
really big head going in there. Okay, how have these traditions? You've kind of discussed this already, but how do you think this multitude of traditions has made Turkey richer as a country?
Okay, let me give you this example. This is a personal example, but I haven't nearly traveled as much as I'd like to, but I've been to places as diverse as, say, like Russia, to Brazil, to United States, if you will, to Europe, to South Africa, and places that I've been to, I could always relate to different things because I think that comes from the multi-ethnic, multi-religious history of Turkey. I can always find a hook to relate to people with, and I think that really comes from the fact that I was born and raised in this place. I actually see so many similarities between Turkey and the United States. We've always been like migrant countries to some extent. We always accepted people from different backgrounds.
Oh, immigrant. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that really is how Turkey became rich. I mean, if you think that U.S. is rich for its different migrant groups, then the immigrant groups that came to Turkey have made this very rich. And you see this, hopefully, when you're in Istanbul, it's a different vibe. When you're in Anatolia, it's a completely different vibe.
Yeah.
And it's always because we have, like with every layer that you build upon, you keep something from the original. I mean, even if you look at the way I think those of us who practice Islam, we have very still like pagan like rituals, but it's because it's something that's indigenous to this.
Yeah. Can you give an example of a pagan ritual that might be?
So, for instance, as you can see from the evil eye tradition, Turks are really afraid of like harm coming from other people.
Yeah.
It's an energy thing, right?
Yeah.
Like people think ill of you, so bad things will happen to you. It's a completely energy thing that is that has no place in Islam if you think about it. And so we have these rituals where they will put like a piece of cloth on top of you, and then they'll have a big bowl of water, and then they'll pour hot lead into it. And it will solidify in water, and it will form all these shapes. And people will read those shapes and say, oh, there are people who are thinking badly of you and they're going to harm you. And then you do that as many times as it takes till the lead is like no longer as scary looking and they no longer see those interpretations. Or like Turkish coffee culture, right? You also interpret coffee grinds. I mean, these are not religious things. These are from our traditional pagan-like, I think, rituals that we incorporate into our daily lives.
Those are great examples. They kind of remind me of Harry Potter.
I love
Very
Harry Potter.
So do you think there are any negative effects of this mixing? And if so, what are they? Obviously, they kind of, I mean, there's so many positive effects, but...
Sure. I think there's so many answers to that question, so I might need to keep looking at it so I remind myself what I'm talking about. I think one thing that we're still trying to figure out, and I don't necessarily like that essay, but like Huntington's like Clash of Civilizations, right? I think we still are trying to figure out where we fit in. And I think it's a very one-dimensional way of looking at it, because I don't think that we necessarily have to fit into a single box like Europe, Asia, Middle East. I think, again, our ability to have an influence or be influenced by all these different regions that surround Turkey is what makes us so unique. So I don't think that we need to be able to fit into anything, but there are always people either within Turkey or outside of Turkey who try to fit us into certain blocks. So I think that's a negative. Another negative is that we live in a very tough neighborhood. I mean, yes, we have Europe on one side, but we still have European countries who are still struggling, like Bulgaria and Greece, with their own identities and with their own domestic dynamics. So that's something difficult. But if you look at our southern border, if you look at the Caucasus, But if you look at our eastern border, which is Iran, these are really tough countries.
Yeah.
And these are countries that try to have a certain level of influence within the region. And that level of influence also plays into our identity politics, I think, to some extent. So that complicates things. We have so many different ethnicities, and because the Turkish national identity building is not an ethnic or racial identity, Turkish is a more cultural national identity. I mean, if you look at where I came from, my great-grandparents on my mom's side migrated from what's Greece today, and my dad's grandparents migrated from what's Russia today. And in my grandma's household, on my dad's side, Russian was the first language that was spoken. But we all identify ourselves as Turks.
Yep. That's so cool.
It is very cool, but it's also very problematic when you have other identity groups within Turkey that have legitimate like languages and traditions. But how do you all combine them under this umbrella that's Turkish? Because I think a lot of people interpret Turkishness as ethnic identity, and I think that